Welcome everyone to NOTeD. That is news of the day brought to you by the True Health Initiative. I am lifestyle medicine specialist, Dr. Tom Rifai, editor for NOTeD, and we are so happy to finally have this happen. We have Professor Christopher Gardner from Stanford, who is, professor of medicine, nutrition researcher, guru, in a way that I am so eager to discuss his science, because it really bridges the gap between science and reality the best that I've seen done yet. That is why he is here. And keeping in mind, Professor, that we are broadcasting mostly to a lay audience. They're smart. There may be some scientists involved, but it's really for the community of people that are following here at the True Health Initiative. And thank you so much for all you do. Obviously, you're on the Council of Advisors. You are one of our real top warriors for health here at the True Health Initiative. So welcome to NOTeD.
Happy to be here, Tom. Really excited to talk to you.
Wonderful. If you don't mind, we have a real tradition here on NOTeD. Before we get into the, was I about to say meat of the matter? Anyway, and we'll get into some of that. It's just know some of your background, what you're willing to share in maybe 5 minutes. Don't try to compress it too much. But what makes Dr. Gardner tick and want to study and convey information about and continuously learn about food and nutrition as it relates to people, the earth? Where did it all start? What was the seed that was planted, and how did it grow to that we're here on this NOTeD today with you?
Okay, I think it's a fun story. So I was a philosophy major undergrad, and I really thought that was, wow, why did I even go to college? I didn't even know why I'm here. I'm going to be a bohemian. I'm going to go check out the world. And I took 6 years off after college, and I explored. I lived in Colorado and learned how to ski, and California, and tried to learn how to surf, but I really suck at surfing. And along the way, to support myself, I worked in a lot of restaurants. And at one point, I had a girlfriend who was vegetarian and dumped me. And I thought, damn it, maybe if I become a vegetarian, she'll take me back. And she never did, but I actually liked being a vegetarian. It seemed to be more consistent with my internal values being a philosophy major. And after about 6 years of not having a real adult job, I thought, well, damn it. Okay, now I have to do this. I have to commit. I guess I have a vegetarian restaurant now that I've really enjoyed this for so long. People are going to make fun of my amino acids. Damn it. I'm going to have a good articulate answer when they give me crap about my amino acids. So I'll go back and get a master's degree. And I went to Berkeley, and they said, dude, you only took Psych 101 in college. You have no science background. I said, I know. That's how I got out of my general ed requirement. I was a philosophy major. I'm bohemian. They said, well, you can't even apply. And I said, well, I'm not daunted. I'm going to take all those classes. And I took 2 years of straight undergrad classes that I had missed. Chem, organic chem, biochem, biology. I took it all back to back. I went back, and as an older adult, I got all A's and A pluses in my classes for the first time in my life. And so when I went back, they said, wow, you're smarter than we thought. Maybe you don't need the master's program. You should get a PhD. And I said, what? Why would I need a PhD to open a restaurant? That sounds stupid, but I remember when you're in school, you're full of potential. Oh, I love being full of potential. And then people ask you, what are you going to be when you grow up? And you say, anything. I'm in school. I'm full of potential. And so I said yes to the PhD. And then I thought I would be a teacher, but nobody gave me a teaching job. And at the last minute, with a wife and a kid at that time, I got offered a postdoctoral research fellowship at Stanford. And to be honest, my PhD was not all that satisfying. In nutrition science, I found most people were studying cells and mechanisms, and I was really interested in behavior and lifestyle. And so I thought maybe I had missed the mark. But this group that I was involved with in Stanford, where I actually still am today, the Stanford Prevention Research Center, was all about behavior, was all about lifestyle, was all about human intervention. And they did it really well. And I started out looking at cardiovascular epidemiology because they had a huge data set called the Stanford 5 City Project, where they had data on 10,000 people from 5 California cities over about a decade or two. And every time I finished a paper, I would say, these vegetables are associated with this, and somebody should test it to see if it's causal, but not me, because I just had a big database to work with. And then one of my colleagues offered me $40,000 to do a little pilot trial. And I thought, this is intoxicating. I just intervened on 14 people. And he said, well, you did pretty well. Here's $200,000. Why don't you intervene on these 80 people? I said, I'm rich, $80,000. Yes. Oh, cause and effect. This is so much fun. And that ended up being a soy study, followed by a garlic study, followed by a weight loss study. And it went from 40,000 to 80,000 to 1 million to 1.5 to 2.5. And recently we did the DIETFITS study. It was actually an $8 million study with 600 people. And so I became intoxicated with this idea of human intervention studies, first just because of the cause and effect, not the association. So it was much more rewarding from that perspective. But the other thing is my philosophy kind of came back full circle, because it really wasn't so much just about the garlic or the soy or the weight loss diet. It was very much about behavior. What motivates you to change? How can you sustain this change? And then I even got into the methodological aspects. I started realizing, wow, I see people studying low carb and low fat, and they haven't defined it very well, and they haven't assessed how well people are adhering. And here, this one group is saying low fat is better, and the other group is saying low carb is better. And if I dig in a little deeper, they actually weren't even comparing the same things. And there was a straw man to knock over here. Oh my gosh. I guess if I'm going to do behavior study with people and diet, I would like to contribute to paying much more attention to defining that diet, assessing the adherence, achieving the adherence, and thinking of all the other factors and barriers that get in their way, which I think alludes to your opening statement about me, which is I really am interested in this holistic picture of how diet fits into the rest of your life. And that seems to have been a niche that not only I really enjoy, but people enjoy hearing about from me. And so I really feel like I've found my purpose. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
And it makes me want to seek out all the information that you put out. And thank you so much for that. Those are some details of, I don't think many people, and maybe even that know you well may know, I'm not sure, but that was great. Thank you for that background. And no pun intended, by the way. Thank you for that wonderful panda in the background. I see we both shared.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, yeah. David Katz, the truth.
The truth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you mentioned DIETFITS. I was so enamored with it. I love DIETFITS and how you went about. I don't want to take any thunder away from it since you already mentioned it. Could you please give us a summary of the reasonings behind the study, what you found, and how I'll tell you how I think after you tell how you think. It really helps people find, as I like to say, where reality meets science on this so-called low carb versus low fat debate.
Yep. If it's okay, I'd love to go back to A to Z, because DIETFITS came from A to Z.
Please.
So, God, this goes back many, many years when Atkins, so I actually got my PhD in 1993. And so it was sort of the late 90s and the early aughts when people were starting to think, oh my God, Zone, South Beach, Atkins, oh, low fat is all wrong. And I thought, I like controversial things. Let me try this. I think Ornish on one end and Atkins on the other, and there's some things in the middle. Maybe I could design and conduct a study that looked at a range of carb and fat ratios with popular diet books. And so I proposed this, and long story short, it got funded, and I had about $2.5 million to work with this. I had 300 women. It was all women. It was all premenopausal women, so I didn't have to deal with hormone therapy or anything like that. Ran for a year. Well-funded, and at the end of the day, a year later, the weight loss was fairly similar. The Atkins group actually lost a little more weight than the others, but it wasn't even statistically significant other than Zone, which was the other low carb diet. So the only statistical significance was between the very low carb and the next low carb. Okay, however, what was much more fun is a colleague of mine named Marcia Stefanik had showed me how she presented some of her data sometimes in a waterfall plot, which is what I call it, which is you line one person after the other, instead of just a mean and a standard deviation, you actually show a graphic with everyone in it lined up from who did the best to the worst and put them next to each other. And I did this for this A to Z study for the 4 diets, which were Atkins and Zone and Ornish and a health professionals diet. And even though I had the standard mean and standard deviation graphic, which went in the paper, when I went to conferences, so many people asked me for this graphic, because what was fascinating was the range of response in the 4 groups after the year, with 75 women in a group, looked virtually superimposable. On all 4 diets, somebody had lost 30 kilos and somebody had gained 5 kilos. And those weren't the outliers. It was a continuum from one end to the other. And when you saw these 4 groups, one over the other, you thought, okay, I see in the main results, it looks like there's a couple pounds difference, but man, within the groups, there's this huge difference. What is going on when they got the same education and guidance? How can they have such different responses? And so I started looking in the literature, and I found a couple things that suggested, actually there's a range of insulin resistance in the general population. And a couple of these very small, short studies that were very rigorous, they were feeding studies at the time, said, if I really control this, it looks like people with insulin resistance who have a hard time with their carbs do better on low carb. But if you're insulin sensitive, even at the same weight range, you might do better on low fat. And so I said, I would love to propose a new study where it's not low carb, it's low versus low fat. It's effect modification, which technically means, hey, is there a personalized way to do this? Maybe we can find some predictors of who would do better on one versus the other. And right about that time, Tom, an outside group had asked me for genetic data that I didn't have from A to Z. We actually went back and recontacted all 300 women, and about 140 gave us a cheek swab where we got some genetic data, and not all the cheek swabs worked. So we went from 300 people to 140 people to about 110 with viable data. And we had 4 diets, and now I separated those into 4 diets. Now the sample sizes are getting kind of small, but it looked like there was a genotype pattern that was predicting differential weight loss. And so I said, okay, wait, now I got 2 things. I got maybe a genotype predisposition, and I got this metabolic predisposition. So I'm going to apply for money and see if I can get 600 people over the course of a year, only have 2 diets, low carb and low fat, and see if either this genetic predisposition or this metabolic predisposition will work. And from all the things that I learned, I really want to make sure I don't have a straw man to knock over here. I want to have, at the end of the day, the low carb fanatics say, wow, you did a really good job with low carb. And the same for low fat. I don't want to have just go to the store and buy a box of crap that says this crap is low fat or this crap is low carb, but it's full of fake sugar or real sugar, which is low fat. No. We said, go to the farmer's market, cook for yourself as much as often. Don't get stuff out of a box. Do low carb and low fat the best you can. So you actually push this as a healthy low fat versus a healthy low carb. The whole idea thinking, I'm probably going to replicate this huge variation in both groups. I'm betting I'm going to get this massive variation. I think I can predict who does better on one versus the other. And in the end, we got just what we thought. Once again, in both groups, some people lost 30 kilos, some people gained 10 kilos this time, have a 40 kilo range of differential response to the same diet, almost identical weight loss on the 2. They both lost about 12 pounds on average at the end of the year. And I'm thinking, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. And so now I'll go into the halls of fame because I've shown how personalized diets will work. And I looked at the genotype pattern and it failed. It actually didn't predict a difference. And then I said, okay, but I'm sure the insulin resistance thing is going to work because that totally makes sense in my head. Failed. Didn't work. Neither of them predicted this. So kind of funny thinking whether DIETFITS is a success or a failure. A bunch of people said, so your study didn't work. And I said, well, wait a sec. I was testing whether this metabolic predictor or genotype pattern would predict it, and it didn't. But we have great adherence. We have great retention. I've got the conduct of the study was great. So
Yeah.
this study is not a failure. And by the way, it was not a test of low carb and low fat. That's not what my hypothesis was. My hypothesis from the beginning was that they would be similar and have a huge amount of variation, but that I should be able to find ways to predict so that I could help people who are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm really having a hard time. Can you help direct me to one diet that's better than another? And at the end of the day, not so much, other than I have a postdoc who did a great job. This paper she's just working on right now, just finishing up. We actually looked at who not only listened to going low in carb and fat, but who listened to the quality. So we have quality metrics, and quality mattered. So not everybody got as low in carb and fat as the one next to them. And not everyone did the cooking for themselves and went to the farmer's market and did that. But when we took apart that variability in the diets, both going low in carb and fat and achieving quality were important. So again, for me, this is adding new important factors to try to explain what's going on. And we do have a bunch of postdocs still looking at things like psychosocial predictors, respiratory quotient, microbiome. So we still have that variability. I still think there's room for trying to figure out how to personalize diets, but in the end, you can lose weight on either low carb or low fat, and you will do better at either one if you choose a quality approach to it than if you just buy the box of low fat crap because it says it's low fat or low carb.
By the way, we're using a technical term, everyone. CRAP is spelled C-R-R-A-P, calorie-rich, refined, and processed. So this is not a pejorative. Dr. Gardner is simply using a technical term that we just wanted to explain to you.
That you invented, right? Isn't that your term?
Yeah,
I really do like that, Tom.
Well, I appreciate that. Also, when you bring up the psychosocial issues, and by the way, I found it for us, in the clinical end of things, it told us so much about choosing what you're willing to actually do and like. I can't believe that anyone would think that's a failure. I mean, it would have been nice to find genetics or insulin resistance, but that's fine if it was there. But if it's not, it's just as valuable, because in the end of the day, what you can convey is which approach are you willing to really stick with? And that might have to do somewhat with your partner and the psychosocial issues beyond our own personal. And I know that's after the fact, it wasn't necessarily a priority, but is there anything you can reveal as far as how the partner's role, let's just say supporter versus saboteur? I hate to simplify it like that, but if you may take the baton as far as what we might see, beyond the subject and in their milieu, their environmental, social environment, I guess in this case. But
so, well, I have great anecdotes there, but I certainly don't have a publishable secondary analysis on this. So we always, at the end of our studies, really admire the participants who did this and want to thank them. We always do a dinner presentation of the results for them before we publish it. And when we do, we ask them to speak up about anything that we might not have captured. And this is a perfect example of somebody saying, God, thank you for this study. I actually lost 40 pounds in the study. I was one of your big winners. And I have to say, I'm happy, but I'm also a little annoyed. My husband wasn't even in the study. He joined, he lost 50 pounds just hanging out with me. He lost more than me, but super supportive, and we cooked together, and it was great. And honky dory, thank you for everything. My husband and I are both thankful. And then the woman next to her was super annoyed. She said, the day I got assigned to my diet, my significant other swore they were going to do it on the other diet. And so we had separate shelves in the fridge, and we didn't cook together, and we didn't eat together. And I lost 15 pounds, but man, I struggled to lose those 15 pounds because my significant other was almost a saboteur in my efforts to do this. So building on what you had just said, I heard that loud and clear from some of the participants in this study. And it was frustrating to hear that, but it was real life.
Yeah, and I love those stories. And I think, if we're to look at, for instance, the English longitudinal study of aging, I think we have, a good idea that when life partners, whether it's quitting smoking or physical activity or weight loss, are on the same page, it's one of those things you almost, I hate to say this because we're obviously trying to be evidence-based, but you almost don't need a study per se to realize that if someone is forcing you to swim upstream, it's going to be more challenging. And at least from an anecdotal perspective, you did hear those types of comments in this group in more personal, if not controlled discussions. Is
Yep,
that a fair summary of that?
absolutely. Yeah.
The uh, factor of physical activity, did it come into play at all? Or it doesn't necessarily exercise, but in any degree, was movement monitored or?
So we did, but it was very much a diet-focused study. So everyone was encouraged to be physically active. We didn't ever tell anybody this is just a diet study. So please, whatever you do, don't be physically active. We said this is for you and your personal health. That recommendation was no different for low fat or low carb, but we didn't put the time into it. It was largely lip service, I have to admit. I mean, for the diet, we gave them recipes. We told them where to shop. We had meeting groups where they could share recipes, and we had strategies for getting over neophobia, fear of new foods, and et cetera. And for exercise, we said, please do go walk or run or swim. We got to talk about diet again. So we really didn't give them much help. We didn't say, here's where to go to the gym, try this if it isn't working. We didn't have any of that. So physical activity went up very modestly in both groups. Now within group, and we haven't actually looked at this as a specific analysis, but I have another anecdote. One of the participants trained for and ran a marathon during the study. And that they were not excluded from doing that because we encouraged everyone to be more physically active, and we didn't want to penalize them from doing that. That was one of the folks who lost 30 kilos because they had trained for and run a marathon over the year of the study as part of their goal.
More power to them. For full disclosure, I've never done one. I have done a half marathon, and I did not run all of that. I walked probably at least a good minority of it. So hats off to them. That's quite an achievement. The question, I guess, I have, going from here is some of the more recent look into, and I think this is really important when you're discussing with Professor Gardner. You just have to start breaking this myth of protein. So if we can kind of discuss just for a minute this concept of protein quality and at least, and I'll freely admit, my perspective is that, the legume deserves much more recognition, and there's more to protein quality than only, I'm not saying disregard amino acids. I'm just saying there's more to it. There's a whole bunch of things that come with different sources of protein. And I'm a flexitarian. I think we've discussed that. I'm flexitarian, but I am a very much lover of legumes, whether it's the sexy story of the blue zones or the fact that they have this amazing combination of protein and fiber and magnesium and potassium and calorie density. And I'm not a magic food guy, but I guess if you were to ask me what's one group that seems to always hit the bullseye, it's in that lovely legume category. So on protein.
It is. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to rant about this. So if I can give a little background to this, one of my epiphanies in the last decade or two was the taste idea. Oh my God, they're not going to do it if it doesn't taste good. And I had the opportunity maybe 9-ish years ago to join forces with the CIA. I'm now on the scientific advisory board of the CIA, and not the Pentagon one, but the Culinary Institute of America one. Yeah, that one. So I was invited to join this group called Menus of Change, where the Culinary Institute of America was partnering up mostly with Harvard. So I was sort of the token Californian. And they thought, let's get the food industry to listen to us. We're chefs. We are the lead chefs that from our graduating class of Marriott and major universities and things like that. And we order a lot of food as chefs. Let's say what we think should be going on here, because we are super tired of reacting to the latest fad. Oh my God, it's paleo. Oh, now it's gluten-free. Oh, now it's vegan. Oh my God, I got to make a new menu and order new equipment. Let's start to lead the charge here. Let's define it. And they came up with 24 principles of the Menus of Change. 12 of them were nutrition principles, and 12 of them were operational principles for people in food service. And so we said, these are 24 things that are not going to go away. If you focus on these, your clients and patrons should love the taste, and it'll make good business sense. And as part of this, they said, okay, now are there any themes that would tie multiple principles together? And they said, we have an idea for something called a protein flip, and we're going to build it on something that recently we put out as a dessert flip. So we're pretty concerned about American obesity and all the calories and the big desserts that go after the big dinners. Instead of having a big cheesecake with a raspberry on top, how about a bowl of raspberries with a dollop of cheesecake on top? It's a flip. We didn't take away your cheesecake, we just flipped the proportions. And so we're still giving you the raspberries and the cheesecake. Could we do that with meat and protein? So a lot of this was eat less red meat, eat it better quality, eat more fish, eat more beans. What if we put plants at the center of the plate? It wouldn't have to be vegan or vegetarian. What if you have 2 ounces of chicken or fish or pork on top, not a 12-ounce steak? And given that we're moving in this direction, maybe for our next annual meeting, we should have like a protein 101, because people will probably freak out about their amino acids. Christopher, will you give a talk? And I said, sure, how many hours can I have? And they said, well, actually only 8 minutes. We have a really short slot for you. So I said, all right, protein 101 in 8 minutes. And I gave it, and there were some jaws on the floor when I was done. And they said, what? And I said, yeah, I have a nutrition PhD. This is protein 101. Can you do that next year for 20 minutes? And I said, okay. Oh, that still wasn't enough. Can you do it next year for an hour? So Tom, I have now given probably 30, 40, or 50 protein talks. I've written a protein paper on this, and I'll just try to distill it down to why these jaws dropped. There's a couple of fundamental principles here. One is we have an individual requirement that varies from one person to the next, and they figured what that was 50 years ago, 60 maybe. And there's a bell curve where somebody needs a lot, somebody needs a little. Most people are in the middle. And then when we make recommended daily allowances, we don't pick the middle, because if you picked the middle and everybody got that, half the population would be deficient. So the recommended daily allowance is 2 standard deviations above the estimated average requirement. So if everybody were to get the RDA, by mathematical definition, 97.5% of the population would exceed their individual personal requirement. So that amount is like 45 grams a day for women and 55 grams a day for men. That's a safety buffer on top of what most people probably need. So I explained that, and then I said, and let me show you what USDA tells us about how much food we grow in the US and imports and exports. And let me come at it from a food production point of view. Oh, and I'll give you another point of view. We have the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey that asks people what they eat. Okay, and there's some caveats here. So the USDA overestimates a little because of the waste. We don't actually eat all the food we grow. And when we survey people and ask them how much they eat, they historically underreport. Okay, so let me find a place in the middle. Here's how much we produce, reducing some for waste. Here's how much they say they eat, adding some for reporting. Looks like 90 to 100 grams a day of protein. What? Okay, wait. So for women, it's about 45 or 55 for an RDA, which has a safety buffer. And then Americans eat 100 grams a day. And then what happens if you eat this extra protein? Just turns into muscle, doesn't it? Well, no. Then the simple factor I went after was the human body has an infinite capacity to store fat anywhere. Belly, thighs, your butt, your underarms. Very limited capacity to store glucose as glycogen in your liver or your skeletal muscle. If you were to run that marathon, all those glycogen stores would be done at the end of one marathon. So very limited capacity to store glycogen. So unlimited for fat, very limited for carbohydrate. I often ask the audience, how much protein can you store and where? And they scratch their heads. I've never been asked that before. And I just pointed out how much extra protein people get all the time. They say, well, you're right, I don't know exactly where I store it. And I say, none. There is no storage depot for protein. It's all functional. At the end of the day, if you've rebuilt your muscles and made your hair and your fingernails and your enzymes and your hormones, you convert it all by the end of the day to carbs first and fat second if your glycogen is repleted. And then you got to bust off the nitrogen, turn it into ammonia, excrete it in your kidney, might suck some things out with it. And so I started explaining some of these things, and people said, wow, I didn't realize I eat that much protein and I require that little, and that there's no place to store it. But I should still get the meat protein because of the amino acids, because I know those plants are missing amino acids. And so then I created some graphics and a heat map to show all the amino acids in all the foods. And what you see is almost like a Scrabble board game. Picture that you require 40 grams of protein, which would be a good rough number, and we have 20 amino acids. You might think, I need 40, there's 20 amino acids. I guess I need 2 grams of each amino acid. But no, it's more like Scrabble, where it's not like there's 100 tiles in the Scrabble game and 26 letters of the alphabet, and you need 4 of each letter. There's only one Z and Y, and there's a whole bunch of E's and N's. No, you actually need a whole crap load, not the same kind of crap, of amino acids. You need some glutamate and glutamine and asparagine and aspartate. You need very little cysteine and tryptophan. They're like the Y and the Z of the amino acids. And if you look at the profile of amino acids from a plant food next to an animal food, that's where some of the jaws dropped. They were almost identical. And the things that were a little different was, given that they're all in proportion, and to meet all your needs, they should be in the correct proportions, grains are not missing lysine, but they don't have the right proportion. They're low in proportion. And beans, your favorite legumes, tend to be a little low in methionine and cysteine. They are not missing. And so I had to point out to everybody who said, yes, plants are, let's see, what is it? They are missing some of the amino acids. I said, they're not. They're all there. And nobody had presented it to them like this before, this sort of individual spread of amino acids, almost like another waterfall plot. What do you need the most of and the least of? Side by side. And they said, God, I had no idea the amino acid profile of plants was so similar to animal, except for the limiting amino acid. And that would be a problem, because as you're making all your proteins in your body, as soon as you have run out of one of the amino acids, the rest are useless. You can't, it's like when you play Scrabble. My kid one day said, oh, I have this fabulous word, Dad. I'm just missing one letter. Can I get credit? No, you can't get credit. You have to have all the letters to score. No, okay, so you can't do that with protein either, right? So how could you make up for it? Well, if you were eating 100 grams of protein a day, it wouldn't really matter that you got the proportion just right. If you need 40 grams a day and you only get 40 grams, that proportion better be right.
Right.
But if you need 40 and you get 60 or 80 or 100, it really doesn't have to be that correct. And you don't even have to worry about complementing your proteins if you're vegetarian or vegan, for the most part. So this is a rant I've been giving, and people just seem to be, oh my God, that's sort of some simple, irrefutable stuff that makes sense. And I've given this talk at many medical conferences, and in the end I say, how many of you have any vegetarians or vegans in your practice? And pretty much everybody raises their hand, they have some. I say, how many in your practice have ever treated anyone for protein deficiency? And they all start turning around, because like they haven't, but they assume some of their colleagues have treated. No one. I've never been to a conference yet where any physician in the group has treated someone in the US for protein deficiency. And so it's this, wow, you're right. I guess it's not a real thing.
Exceedingly rare. I can tell you from my practice, in which I did a decent amount of preoperative, meaning for Roux-en-Y and sleeve gastrectomy evaluation, postoperative surveillance. Even in those groups, once in a rare while you get a gastric bypass patient like that, but it's not. And I tell you, I'm a convert. Admittedly, my background, was in bodybuilding, and I thought about all this protein, and I've been clearly convinced that it's far more to the resistance training is the important part. And in fact, some concern about insulin resistance being aggravated by excess, particularly branched chain amino acids. And we don't want to necessarily valine and get people too glossed over. But, while there might be some role in weight loss and satiety and so on and so forth, most people think it's way more, and they don't realize how much you get from a couple ounces, 3 ounces, even at 4 ounces. Honestly, I think that there's even competitive athletes who, everyone says with a competitive athlete, the exception, maybe a bodybuilder who's on steroids and is doing some kind of, nitrogen retention to the point that that's not for health. That's a completely different issue. You really can do so much with legumes. And so I told you I was going to ask you a question without prompting you. So your favorite legume, or the last legume you had, and your favorite legume, and it can be a lentil, a pea, a bean, whatever it is. What is in Christopher's menu when it comes to legumes on some regular basis? You're on the spot now.
Yeah, all right. So really, I have a lot of garbanzo beans in my cabinet right now, and two main ways that I use them. So one of my regulars is a really fancy salad. Fancy only in the terms that it's just not green leaf lettuce and salad dressing. So bed of green leaf, and then I put on some whatever's in the fridge, red bell peppers, carrots, red cabbage. Then I add garbanzo beans, and then I add some nuts. Then I add some avocado, and I add some Greek olives. And so it's actually a pretty high fat salad by the time I'm done with the Greek olives and the olive oil on top and the avocado. So that's one. So I have garbanzo beans all the time that way, but also hummus is so fast to make. Like the other day, my kid said, I would eat these carrots if there was hummus on it, but I don't just want plain carrots. And we were in the middle of dinner. And I said, we don't have any hummus right now, but wait a sec. I just cranked open a can, I chucked it in, I threw in some garlic, I threw in some lemon, I threw in some tahini, I threw in some paprika, I hit spin, I walked back with hummus. I said, oh, okay, I'll eat the carrots now. In the middle of dinner, I made hummus.
Yeah, and one of the most versatile ways that, and by the way, for people that are maybe not even ready to hit the spin button on a blender, and who may have some concern about maybe the high amounts of sodium in typical store-bought, we have a kind of dilution as the solution. It's not really it's not the flip, but you can just grab some no salt added garbanzo beans and mix them cup for cup with your favorite hummus and stir it right up. And
yeah, absolutely,
it's a beautiful, beautiful bean. And of course, having my parents originated from Syria, so we obviously love garbanzo beans.
Okay.
That's wonderful. I love lentils too. By the way, I didn't mean to say that I didn't love other legumes, but that is there's such a great resource that people have maybe a lack of awareness of, and maybe need to build up a little bit. I mean, they are the magical fruit that makes you toot. Okay, for a little while, you might have to ease yourself into it. But can you give us and it can be as short as you like. I mean, you can just say, forget about that, let's move on. Some real, truth about this anti-lectin hype.
Right? Oh yeah, it's hype. Oh, I don't even want to pay any attention to it. It's one of these things like, oh, you actually might blood clot from getting the COVID vaccine. Yeah, that would be like 1 in a million, and you might save 10,000 lives type thing.
Right.
I suppose there's something about lectins, but if you cook them, and if you're having them in a mixed diet, and you're going to miss out on the fiber and the nutrients and all the things in beans because of the lectins. That's just crazy. No, totally dismiss that plant paradox.
Exactly. And it just wouldn't seem ironic. And I think this was, how did David Katz put it? Eating wrong the best way. I mean, in other words, his point was legumes are one of the most consistently found foods across all blue zones.
Yes.
So the irony that, whether it's edamame in Asia, or it's lentils and fava beans in the Mediterranean, or it's, it's black beans and kidney beans in Latin America, whatever, in Costa Rica, they're consistently across. So if it would be pretty ironic. I guess it's possible. It's not, blue zones aren't a controlled study, but it'd be pretty ironic if this most consistent food group across all, and with different types across all these different populations, just happened to be toxic for you. So,
and then can I push back on you? Let's see if we can have some fun with you and the readers. So how would you categorize legumes, peas, chickpeas, lentils, pulses, etc.? I actually go nuts thinking like, what's the hierarchy? When I went to a conference one time with somebody from the lentil world, I said, do you have a graphic? I'm having a really hard time. Like when I say this in research papers, I don't know about you, I can't just say beans. It's not just beans, and lentils is too narrow. And so what do you think is the overarching concept? What is the term at the highest level?
I mean,
of
I have to be
that
honest with
whole
you,
family.
as a practical, the reality meets science guy, I just use legumes. And even when I say legumes, I know that I might confuse some people. So I, whittle it down for the practical purposes of that respecting healthcare literacy, even my own, of just saying, beans. I might distinguish garbanzo beans a bit, but essentially beans, lentils, and peas. And I think for most people that will get them far enough that they're in the right zone. But clarify further for us.
Yeah, that is great. It's legumes is the top.
Right.
And then lentils and pulses. So if you're in India, it might be more pulses. Chickpeas are actually like something separate. Lentils are separate. Peas are separate, but they all fall under legumes. And so I just don't think that's a word that Americans use all the time. So I was really fascinated to hear that you use that quite frequently today. It's actually the best word, the best term to cover all those different families. But I find that I don't get everybody resonating with that term. So I almost have to say legumes, peas, beans, lentils, pulses, chickpeas. But it really is all in that same family. They share more commonalities than things that they did. I mean, compared to vegetables or nuts or other things, they're a family. It's a great family.
Oh, you reminded me, by the way, with your salad, which which brings us back to DIETFITS just for a moment. You mentioned high fat, but at the same time, I'm thinking the base of your salad having such and Barbara Rolls will be happy with us now as I'm about to bring in the term calorie density. That's such a great equalizer. That was something that was encouraged because whether you're high fat or low fat, I should say low carb, low fat, the DIETFITS group was encouraged to have a base of vegetables. Is that fair to say?
Salad, yeah, vegetables. We wanted even low carbers. We wanted to have vegetables every day for the nutrient density.
Yes.
And the satiety factor. So really the vegetables have relatively few calories for the number of nutrients they deliver, but they're bulky. So yes, totally in honor of Barbara Rolls, who I believe you interviewed recently. Is that true?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
true.
love that concept that it's really the bulking satiety factor that, oh my God, I'm full. I had this massive thing in front of me. Wasn't really that many calories.
That's right.
Depending on how many vegetables are in it. So it can be very satiating from the sheer bulk of it and very nutrient dense. Yes.
And when you are on a base of, and I would throw in most at least whole fruits, but the majority of whole fruits and vegetables, from there, whatever you're doing, it's hard to, I don't even like to say right or wrong, but I mean, you've made such a huge advance forward that whatever you happen to add to it, you're going to do well. So I appreciate you letting me step back and discuss that. I'll tell you, I feel like I'm looking at the time here and I feel like it was just 10 minutes. And I realize I've already taken you 20 minutes over the amount that you promised. Professor Christopher Gardner, that was amazing. I am so excited to put this together and put this out and get this across the channels. Just really can't thank you enough for all the work that you do in general for the public, obviously for the True Health Initiative, and for the time that you've taken here today on News of the Day on NOTeD on behalf of the THI. Thank you.
Oh, brother in passion here. Thank you for all that you do, Tom.
Thank you, sir. We'll touch base again soon.
Soon.